Most people do not fail because they invest incorrectly. They fail because they quit at the exact moment when money is about to start working for them. They save consistently, they invest every month. But after 5, 6, even 7 years, their account still grows so slowly that it makes them wonder, what am I doing wrong? The uncomfortable truth is this. The first $100,000 is not a wealth milestone. It is a survival test. And most people do not pass it. Not because they lack discipline, not because returns are low, but because they do not have a system that is correct enough to survive until compounding truly appears. There is an asset allocation system more than 3,000 years old that was designed precisely for this problem. It does not help you get rich quickly. It ensures that you are not eliminated from the game before money begins to accelerate, and if you are feeling stuck right before that door. This video is for you. I'm Victor, and I spend an unreasonable amount of time studying compound interest, financial behavior, and why intelligent, disciplined people still remain financially stuck for life. This channel is not about getting rich quick, not about investment hacks, hot coins, or the perfect trade. We talk about systems, the structures that make money work even when you are not perfect. In this video, I will show you why most people quit right before compound interest awakens, and which allocation system helps some people reliably reach $1 million, while the rest do not. If you are building wealth for the long term and want to understand how this game actually works, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this is knowledge that is not taught in school and not encouraged to be sold to you. Now, before talking about any numbers or strategies, we need to fix a fundamental misunderstanding that has caused millions of people to invest correctly, yet still never reach the finish line. When thinking about building wealth, most people imagine a very simple path. Every dollar saved today moves them $1 closer to tomorrow's goal. Like climbing a staircase, step by step, step 1, then step 2, then step 3. It sounds reasonable, but it's like standing on a treadmill and thinking you're climbing a mountain. You sweat. You try every day. But the scenery around you doesn't change at all. In reality, money does not operate in a straight line. Wealth grows along a curve. Imagine rolling a snowball down a mountain. At the beginning, it rolls very slowly. You have to keep pushing it. You can barely see it getting bigger. But once it's large enough and has been on the slope long enough, it starts rolling on its own, faster, stronger, almost impossible to stop. Building wealth works the same way. This is exactly why the first $100,000 is so hard to reach. Not because the number itself is special, but because before this point, almost all the money in your account comes from what you put in yourself, not from growth. For example, if you invest about $500 a month, an amount equivalent to a few meals out, a few coffees, a few expenses, you can't even remember where they went. And if that investment earns an average of 7% a year, it will take you nearly 8 years to reach your first $100,000. 8 years. During that entire time, compound interest is still working. But it works in silence. You open your account and see this month up a little, next month down a little overall. Still not very significant. This is a very discouraging phase. Like going to the gym for the first 6 months. You go consistently. You don't miss sessions. But every time you look in the mirror, you still see the same person. Not much different from day one. And it's right then that many people begin to ask themselves, maybe this just isn't for me. Maybe investing only works for rich people, people who start with a lot of capital. But the truth is, they are not doing anything wrong. They are simply standing at the hardest stretch of the entire journey. The problem is, this is also where misguided reactions begin to appear. Some people look at their account growing too slowly and panic. They decide to hold more cash, stop investing, and wait for a more certain time. They feel safe because they have money in hand, but in reality, their money is standing still while time keeps moving. On the other hand, some people lose patience. After a few years of seeing nothing, they decide to put all their money into a single thing, a real estate deal, a sure win stock, or a business project they believe will shorten the path. These two choices may look very different on the surface, but deep down, they are exactly the same. Both stem from a misunderstanding of how compound interest works and an attempt to force growth to happen faster than its natural pace. And right here, something interesting happens. A very ancient system, born in a time with no stock markets, no investment funds, no modern concept of compound interest, was designed precisely to address this psychological weakness in humans. A system not meant to make you rich quickly, but to ensure that you are not eliminated from the game before money has a chance to start working for you. More than 3,000 years ago, a system was designed for exactly the problem we've just discussed, not to help anyone get rich quickly, but to ensure they are not eliminated from the game before time has a chance to exert its power. This system was not born in a boardroom, did not come from Excel spreadsheets or modern financial models. It was formed through generations of survival experience and is called by a very simple name, rule of thirds. It sounds like a money-splitting formula. But in reality, it begins with an observation that most modern investors overlook. Money is not only different in terms of what you invest in, money is different in how it operates. Money exists in three states that cannot replace one another. Not three asset classes, but three functional states. The first state is long-term stability. These are assets that tend to hold value and appreciate over time, especially in inflationary environments. But in exchange, they are very difficult to convert into cash quickly. Think about real estate. A house can increase in value over 10 or 20 years. But if tomorrow you urgently need money within 30 days, you would have to sell at a discount, or might not be able to sell at all. This stability comes with a lack of flexibility. The second state is active growth. This is where your effort, skills, and time are leveraged. A business, a job with income growth potential, an activity that generates cash flow through your direct involvement. For example, a well-run store can produce steady profits. But if the market slows down or costs rise faster than revenue, you cannot simply withdraw money like taking it out of a bank account. Money here is working, but it is also constrained. And then there is the third state, the state that many people underestimate. Liquidity, money that can be used immediately. No need to sell assets. No need to borrow. No need to ask for more time. Liquidity is not meant to generate quick returns. It is like oxygen. You don't think about it when everything is normal, but when it's missing, the entire system is immediately at risk. Most people are taught that cash is money that is sitting idle, while real estate or business is money that is working. That sounds very reasonable. But this is exactly the trap. You don't lose because you chose the wrong asset. Many people lose because they had the right asset at the wrong time. They are forced to sell a house when the market is down. They cannot expand a business when competitors are collapsing. They miss the best opportunity of their lives simply because they don't have cash on hand. That is why a concept emerges: forced seller, someone who is forced to sell. And forced sellers never build long-term wealth. Not because they are less intelligent, but because their system cannot withstand timing pressure. Rule of thirds does not view liquidity as an emergency fund to protect yourself. It views liquidity as a mandatory part of financial architecture, like a bridge. You may never notice the central pillar, but without it, the bridge cannot exist. When each state takes up roughly 1/3, you can completely lose one leg and still survive on the remaining two. Real estate collapses. Business and cash keep you standing. Business fails. Stable assets and liquidity protect you. Cash loses value due to inflation. Assets and growth compensate. This is not overly conservative investing. This is offense with protection. And this is the most important thing to understand before moving forward. Rule of thirds does not make you rich. It ensures that you stay in the game long enough for real wealth milestones to actually happen. Let me be very clear about this, because if you miss this moment, the rest of the video will be meaningless. Rule of thirds does not make you rich. It keeps you from being eliminated from the game before wealth milestones occur. Most people do not fail at the $1 million mark. They never even get there. They are eliminated very early. At $30,000, at $60,000, or right before reaching their first $100,000. Think about this. Someone saves and invests consistently for a few years. They have accumulated a sum that is not small compared to before, but not large enough to create a clear difference in their life. Then an event occurs. It could be job loss. It could be an unexpected investment opportunity. It could be the market dropping sharply right when they need money. If all of their assets are locked up, they have no choice. They are forced to sell, not because it is a good decision, but because it is the only decision left to them. And it is right here that two stories that seem unrelated are actually the same story. The story of compound interest and the story of rule of thirds. Milestones, like $100,000, $650,000, or $1 million, are not rewards for the smartest investors. They are the natural consequence of staying in the game long enough. Compound interest does not require you to be perfect. You do not need to time the bottom. You do not need to avoid every mistake. But compound interest demands something extremely rare. You must not be forced to make stupid decisions during the hardest phase of the journey. No panic selling. No all-in moves out of impatience. No breaking the system just to speed things up a little. And that is the true role of rule of thirds. It does not make you rich faster. It keeps you at the table long enough for time and compound interest to do their work. So now let's look at what this actually looks like in practice. When you apply rule of thirds throughout the journey from $0 to $100,000, then $650,000, and finally $1 million. When your total net worth is still under $100,000, your biggest enemy is not low returns. It is loss of liquidity. At this stage, compound interest is not yet strong enough to protect you. Most of your assets still come from the money you personally put in each month. That means that just one slip, losing a job, an unexpected expense, or a market shock can force you to exit the game entirely. Therefore, rule of thirds at this stage is not a rigid 33-33-33 formula. You do not need to split your money mechanically. But there is one absolute principle that must not be broken. There must always be a portion of money that is not locked up, not constrained, and does not require anyone's permission to use. Imagine you have $30,000 or $40,000 in savings. If all of that money is tied up in an apartment, a long-term contract, or an investment you cannot withdraw from for 6 to 12 months, then, from a system perspective, you are in an extremely fragile state. This is a very clear line that many people do not want to admit. If you have to sell something in order to have money to invest, you are not ready to invest. If you have to borrow money to seize an opportunity, then you are not being bold. Your system is flawed. Many people ruin the sub $100,000 phase because they believe the earlier they go all in, the faster they will get there. They see others showing off profits, hear about big winning deals, and start to feel that they are moving too slowly. But what they are actually doing is increasing the probability of being eliminated from the game. They place their entire financial future on one or two decisions, while compound interest has not yet had a chance to appear to protect them. Rule of thirds, at this stage, does not help you make more money. It helps you survive. Survive the most uncomfortable early years. Survive long enough to reach the day when your money finally begins to work for you. When you cross the $100,000 mark, everything begins to change in a very clear way. For the first time, you open your account and realize the increase in money this year no longer comes primarily from what you put in. Compound interest is no longer silent. It begins contributing more than you do. If before each month you had to push the system forward, now the system starts to roll on its own. And it is at this exact moment that a very dangerous feeling appears. You start to think, it seems like I've figured out the formula. You look back at your recent decisions and see that they all produced good results. The account grows steadily. Everything seems to be going in the right direction. This is when many people become overconfident. They start to go all in. They reduce cash because they believe it is no longer necessary. They increase leverage. They put more money into exactly what has worked best over the past few years. For example, someone buys their first property and sees the price go up. They immediately buy a second, then a third, using that same asset as leverage for the next purchase. Or someone sees their portfolio grow strongly and then withdraws all of their reserve cash to optimize returns. On the surface, these decisions look very reasonable, but deep down, their system is becoming more fragile than ever. Rule of thirds. At this stage is not meant to slow you down. It does not exist to restrain growth. It exists to prevent you from destroying your own momentum, right when everything starts working. Because there is a very hard truth: to accept the biggest opportunities in a person's life do not appear when everything is going well. They appear when the market is dislocated, when prices fall, when others are forced to sell, when fear spreads. And ironically, this is exactly the phase when most people miss the biggest opportunity of their lives. Not because they fail to recognize the opportunity, but because they no longer have cash to act. They have used up all their liquidity to feel optimized beforehand. And when the most critical moment arrives, they can only stand and watch. As you approach the $650,000 mark, something very important begins to happen. For the first time in your life, your assets can generate around $40,000 to $50,000 per year on their own, without requiring you to work longer hours or put in more effort. This number may not make you rich in the traditional sense, but it is large enough to change how you perceive risk. And that is what truly matters. At this point, your psychology begins to shift. You no longer wake up every morning with the fear of losing your job. You no longer feel trapped in a job just because of bills, rent, or financial obligations. For example, if before you did not dare to quit because even a few months of income interruption would cause everything to collapse, now you know that your system can still stand even if you stop for a while. And from here, a very different concept emerges: optionality. You can learn a new skill without it needing to generate money immediately. You can change careers, accept starting slower for a few years in exchange for a better long-term direction. You can even start a business, not because you are desperate or trying to save your financial situation, but because you have choice. At this stage, rule of thirds no longer plays a defensive role. It does not just help you avoid mistakes. It becomes a tool to buy optionality. Liquidity is no longer just for protection. It allows you to act when the right opportunity appears. Stable assets keep you from being eroded by inflation, and the growth component continues to push the system further. This is when the concept of rich begins to be redefined. Being rich is not having a lot of money on paper. Being rich is when you can say no to bad choices without fearing immediate consequences. You can refuse a toxic job. You can pass on a deal you do not trust. You can wait, and waiting itself is a form of power. And this is why, when you reach the $1 million mark, the biggest change is not the number in your account. It is how you see the world. You begin to view every decision through a longer-term lens. You understand that every dollar not only has value today, but also carries the potential of many years ahead. But there is a hard truth to accept. Most people never reach this stage. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they are not hardworking, but because they break the system at some point earlier before it has a chance to do what it was designed to do. When you look at enough different financial journeys from people just starting out to those who already have significant assets, you begin to recognize an uncomfortable truth. Most people do not fail because of bad decisions. They fail because they are forced to make decisions at the worst possible times. Think about someone who has accumulated a meaningful amount compared to their past. They do not spend recklessly. They also do not invest blindly. But when the market declines at the exact moment they need money, or when a personal shock occurs, they have no choice but to sell the very thing they should not be selling. Not because they do not understand risk, but because their system does not allow them to wait. This is the core difference in how two groups of people view money. The poor and most of the middle class manage their finances by avoiding losing money. They optimize for an immediate sense of safety. Hold tight. No risk, no mistakes. This approach is very understandable, but it only manages half of the risk equation. The wealthy understand that in financial life, there are always two types of risk: operating in parallel. The first risk is losing money. And the second risk, spoken about far less, is the risk of missing opportunity. You may avoid major losses, but if your system causes you to always be on the sidelines when critical opportunities appear, then the price you pay will be measured in years of your life. And this is the unforgiving rule of the market-forced sellers: never build generational wealth. Those who are forced to sell never hold assets long enough for time and compound interest to do their work. You can be very intelligent. You can analyze correctly, read correctly, understand correctly. But if your system forces you to sell when the market is bad, forces you to stop when opportunity appears, then all that intelligence does not mean very much. Losing does not come from choosing the wrong asset. It comes from not having choice. And that is how rule of thirds must be reconsidered. Rule of thirds was not designed to maximize short-term returns. It is not meant to help you win big faster than others. It exists to eliminate the forced selling scenario from your financial life. It ensures that when things get bad, you can still stand still. And when things become distorted, you can still act. That is why those who reach $100,000, then $650,000, then $1 million are rarely the people who earn the most in the short term. They are the people who are not eliminated from the game halfway through. They stay, they wait, and they let time finish its work. And this is the final thing you need to understand before we end this video. If you look back at the entire journey from $0 to $100,000 to $650,000, and finally to $1 million, one very clear truth emerges. $1 million is not a reward for the smartest person. It is a reward for the person who stays long enough with the right system, not the person who makes the most money in a short period of time, not the person who buys the exact bottom or sells the exact top, but the person who does not eliminate themselves from the game during the hardest and most discouraging years. Think about two people who start at the same time. Both are hardworking. Both have stable incomes. Both invest consistently. The first person constantly breaks the system, going all in, when confident, panic selling when afraid, and always trying to move faster. The second person is not exceptional at every individual decision. But they have a system strong enough to not force them to sell at the wrong time and not push them into unnecessary gambles. After 20 or 30 years, the gap between those two people is no longer skill or knowledge. It is time spent staying in the game. Therefore, the most important question in financial life is not, when will I be rich? The correct question is, can my system survive 20 to 30 years? If the answer is yes, then milestones like $100,000, $650,000, or $1 million are no longer vague goals. They become almost inevitable outcomes. Rule of thirds does not require you to be perfect. You do not need to always be right. You do not need to optimize every decision. It only requires you to respect boundaries strong enough to protect you from yourself during the moments when mistakes are most likely. If this video helps you see money differently, no longer as a short-term win-or-lose game, but as a system that must survive across decades hit-like, not for the algorithm, but as a personal commitment that you will build the system before chasing returns. And if you want to continue learning how financial systems actually operate, not tricks, not hacks, but structures that have existed and proven their value over time, subscribe to this channel. We do not build shortcuts. We build systems.